Folks, thank y'all so much. I know getting up early on a Friday morning is the last thing a lot of us want to do because we're already looking forward to Saturday and Sunday. If you don't mind, I'm going to step out from behind the podium. As you heard the mayor say, I went to New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, one of those others. Now, I was a marriage and family therapist, so nobody panic. But when you hang out with that many preacher boys, you give them a microphone, a podium, and a crowd this large, you got to pass an offering plate, Brother Travis. And Mayor, with the shape our budgets are in, that may not be a bad idea. Now, I had the privilege of doing marriage and family counseling, being on the front lines, working with couples and families dealing with some of the most gut-wrenching, difficult situations in their lives, and seeing some of those families succeed and go on with happy families and marriages, children growing up now that are productive with their own families, and now I'm your state auditor. I'll get that connection right. That's natural progression, go from being seminary to go marriage and family therapist, but I actually went to work for the James Dobson organization, Alabama Policy, Alabama Family Alliance in Birmingham, working with Montgomery on pro-family legislation. That got me back into government affairs work and everything, and Billy Howard in Laurel, Mississippi. I was home one time. He said, "You ever thought about moving back home?" I said, "Mr. Howard, what would I do in Laurel?" He said, "Work for me." He said, "I never had anybody do government affairs work and contracts." And he said, "You seem to understand that, know what you're doing." And, for any Mississippi boy, if I had a chance to bring my kids back and raise in Mississippi, as my wife said, you just say yes and God and I'll take care of the rest. And so we moved back home, and it's been a great being back home where our roots are, and my kids growing up on the same farm I grew up on, my father and grandfather, and that's what makes being a Mississippian great. And I don't want to disappoint you today, but I'm really not going to talk about credits and debits. Larry, I know you're disappointed. I'm not going to arrest you today. He keeps waiting. He keeps coming to these events. I don't know what he's expecting, but we're at a prayer breakfast. And so today I really want to sort of get out of the politics, get out of the American Recovery Reinvestment Act and other things that are occupying our time at the auditor's office, and deal with really why we're here. And that's to pray for Richland, Mississippi, the United States, and our families. That's why we're gathered together this morning, and that's what we need to focus our attention and bring it together of why we are here together. But before I go down that road, there's a story I want to share with you, and it happened not far down the road down in New Orleans. And there was a young piano player, and he went on to great things, nationally recording artist. I mean, his CDs were selling all over the world, and great concerts. But when he was home and when he was growing up, there was this little music hall he would go to, and they would jam in the corner on this little stage, and everybody from the neighborhood would all hang out and listen to all the musicians. And they had this red, just beat up, nasty old piano in that corner. I mean, the lacquer was coming off of it. And you'd play it, and it'd be out of tune, and occasionally there were some keys that would stick, but that was, the little local hangout. Well, after Katrina and all this destruction, he went home to visit, and he went by one afternoon right at dusk, and people were starting to gather at this little music hall, and he walked inside, y'all, and there was the prettiest, bright red piano you ever seen in your life in that corner on that little stage. He couldn't wait. He slapped the owner on the back, went straight up to the stage, and he got ready to play for all his family and friends, and the same key that had always stuck. And then he played the next chord, and it was out of tune, like it had always been out of tune, and he turned and looked at the owner, and the owner said, "What, you think we bought a new one? We just painted the old one." The lesson in that is the fact that so many times in our lives, as Americans, as Mississippians, we'll put on a good outer cover, a new coat of paint. We'll put on a good appearance and look good, but the inside has never changed. The inside of that piano is still broken and still out of tune, and that's the way it is with our lives a lot of times. It's the way it is with our families. We can put on a good image, but we never change what's on the inside. And the reason we're gathered together for a prayer breakfast this morning is to say, as the mayor said earlier, to change the inside, the heart and the soul of our nation, and it can start right here. We've got to change the heart and the soul and the minds of our community and our neighbors and our family and our friends. 20 to 30 years after the founding of our nation, we'd already gone through the Revolutionary War. Our founding fathers had put the Articles of Confederation, which really failed, did not work, and they gathered back together and wrote this great Constitution. And right after that, our nation exploded. People were moving from around the world to come and live here. Our economy was robust. People were moving out into the frontier and establishing new towns and new businesses and new opportunity. Meanwhile, across the seas in France, they followed our example. They had revolution. They had their own revolution, established their own government. But it had failed, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Meanwhile, our government is growing, our economy is booming. People are moving and want to be a part of it. And there was a young man named Alexis de Tocqueville. And he convinced a lot of other folks in France to let him come to America and see what we did that was different. And he went and he visited our prisons. He visited our government courthouses, our city halls. He visited Washington, D.C. He went to the marketplace. He went to stockbroker home. I mean, you name it, he went to. Brokerage houses. And finally, one day in upstate New York, Alexis de Tocqueville said, you know, he heard the church bells ringing from his hotel room and said, you know, the one thing I have not done is visited one of their houses of worship. That afternoon, he wrote in his journal, the reason America is great is because fiery righteousness is preached from her pulpits. He understood what made America's revolution and experiment in democracy different than the failed experiment in democracy in France was what was on the inside. It was not all the trappings of liberty. It was not the trappings of freedom and democracy. It was the core gut value belief of the people of America in the righteousness of God and how that was lived out in their lives. As your state auditor, I tell folks week in and week out, this is an easy job. You just do what your mother and grandmother told you to do in Sunday school. It's that simple. If we're going to change the future of our nation for Katie Beth and Robert Green and Harrison and John Thomas, my children, your children, grandchildren, it's got to start inside, deep with each and every one of us. Now, I know some of you are already saying, well, Stacey, we got to get to work at some point in time. And this is a prayer meeting. And Mayor, I'm not as young as I used to be, and I have been introduced to these glasses this year. But I got 2 passages of Scripture I want to read to y'all this morning. 2 passages of Scripture, one from the Old Testament and one from the New Testament, to challenge you to realize what is important. And that we have to have a sense of urgency about changing the heart and the soul and the mind of our nation. The first comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6, a passage my wife and I love dearly. We try to read to our kids. This has to be one of the governing passages of our marriage and our family. In verse 4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And these commandments that I give you today are to be upon your heart. But listen to verse 7, the next half of this passage. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. Tie these as symbols on your hands, bind them on your foreheads, write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Half that entire passage did not deal with you and it did not deal with me. It dealt with our children and the next generation and what our responsibility is to them.